Hello, everyone. I'm very happy and proud to welcome you at our Cartier Art Dialogues, organized in partnership with the State Hermitage Museum. Today, we will talk about different forms and formats of art and also trends reshaping creative field. And it's great to be here in St. Petersburg, a true mecca for everyone who is interested in art and culture and heritage and history. And Cartier Museum is really proud to have a long-standing connections with this magnificent city and our country. We will bring it up later. We are broadcasting from the General Staff Building of Hermitage Museum, and I think it's a very symbolic place, which bridging past, present, and future. Ideal setting for cross-generational conversation, in fact. You know, it's a real winter here, and I think it's perfectly reflected in our absolutely snowy white studio. And I would like to give the floor to Dmitry Ozerkov, the head of Contemporary Art Department of Hermitage Museum, who will lead our first panel session, Living Heritage and Cross-Generational Dialogue. Let's see that.
Good morning, everyone. Janina, thank you very much that in your introduction you let us see again this fantastic General Staff building of the Hermitage Museum. Here we go, and welcome to the Living Heritage and Cross-Generational Dialogue that opens the unique Cartier Art Dialogue Conference. The conference is dedicated to the topical issue of heritage preservation in the modern world, and it's timed to coincide with the exhibition that was just opened and became the culmination of cooperation between Cartier and the Hermitage Museum. I'm honored to introduce you to the participants of this first session. That is Mikhail Borisovich Piatovsky, General Director of the State Hermitage Museum, Cyril Vigneron, CEO and President of Cartier, Pierre Nero, Image, Style and Heritage Director of Cartier, Laurent Salomé, Director of Château de Versailles, that will join us later, and Janina Novitskaya, Managing Director of Cartier Russia, Ukraine and CAA. Thank you. Cultural heritage is an integral part of the life of a civilized society. How do we ourselves use the heritage daily? Do we treat it correctly? Do we store it securely? Do we skillfully leverage it? What does it even mean to us to use the heritage of the past generations? Owing to the understanding of its heritage, society realizes itself and defines its values, forms its identity. Therefore, it is not just an issue of preserving cultural heritage that is so important today. It is an issue what methods, what channels, what media we use in order to properly pass this heritage down to the next generations. I would love to, before we start our discussion, to let Mikhail Borisovich Piatovsky say his words, how you see this discussion, how you see these problems.
Well, first of all, welcome to Hermitage. Welcome for such a wonderful meeting. It's a pleasure to have you all here. It's a pleasure to have such a, I think, interesting discussion. We are in the General Staff building. Well, Cartier is French, so the name L'État-Major is a much better name for this building because we are struggling to find the proper name which will be understandable for everybody. It's about art, future, and previous history, because Главный штаб General Staff building, building of Главный штаб, it still is a name which doesn't connect the whole history. So we are working on this. Everything in this building is new and working and thinking about new. According to the system of development, the labor between Hermitage, Winter Palace, Hermitage galleries, and other buildings of Hermitage, this building, according to the scheme we developed with Rem Koolhaas, is laboratory. It's a laboratory of how museum, how the restoration must be done, how museum must be developed today, having different kind of audience and having all kinds of audience. So I welcome you, and we are making an important experiment, at least for me. We are all accustomed to have Zoom conferences. We always say, oh, Zoom conference terrible, it's much better to let's meet live and so on. So we're making, now I'm doing a study, is it better or not? What is better, what is not? For instance, absolutely, sitting in your chair at home is much more comfortable, especially if this kind of chairs for these panels are becoming more and more uncomfortable and ugly. You must have your water on the floor, you can't put your papers and so on and so on. So then we'll see how about the translation. The simultaneous translation is online, so I don't hear how my word is translation in Russian, and so on. So I think we are going, all our life is hybrid, so we are developing system of hybrid conferences about hybrid thing, which is connection between future and past and today. So this is an introduction and welcome, and looking forward for the interesting discussion and controversial one.
Thank you very much indeed, Mikhail Borisovich, and certainly one of our keys of reasons of meeting today is the exhibition that some of you may have already visited, the exhibition between the Hermitage Museum and Cartier that just opened recently, and we would love to share with you a short video about this exhibition from the Hermitage.
Le style est la notion qui fait le lien entre les créations du passé et celles d'aujourd'hui.
Все экспонаты, которые реставрировались на протяжении этих 5 лет, представляют собой уникальные артефакты, берущие истоки в колыбели очень разных культур.
Une salle décorativement puissante et des objets très forts en eux-mêmes. Donc c'est de trouver un liant.
Такие высокохудожественные вещи вызывают восторг у каждого, кто их видит.
Russia is an eternal source of inspiration for all of us. And so that's why this project is so dear to us and dear to my heart.
Отправной точкой данного проекта являлась, безусловно, реставрационная работа над экспонатами из коллекции Государственного музея Эрмитажа. И выставка, в общем-то, не являлась целью этого проекта, а стала таким очень естественным, органичным этапом 5-летнего сотрудничества.
Clairement, cette exposition est un hommage à l'artisanat et aux techniques d'exception, je dirais, à l'art de la main des artisans, et des artisans, je dirais, de tous les pays.
Проект поистине мультикультурный, именно потому, что и экспонаты, которые мы представляем, принадлежат разным культурам. Также команда, которая работала над этим проектом, это тоже международная команда, что особенно ценно и важно в наше время.
Et en fait, chaque artisanat, d'ailleurs, puise dans d'autres cultures aussi ses évolutions et, je dirais, son inspiration.
5 памятников Эрмитажа, которые были отреставрированы нашими реставраторами, они происходят из разного времени, из разных стран и охватывают период более 1000 лет.
Были выбраны самые уникальные предметы, которые были переданы нам в лабораторию. Начиная с X века экспонаты и вплоть до XVIII века, даже до XIX века. Там требовалось довольно серьезное вмешательство, и мы использовали как традиционные технологии, так и новые. По времени, если говорить реставрационных направлений, то это было в среднем около полугода на каждый экспонат. Очень много.
Каждый из этих предметов нашими коллегами из команды Cartier была дополнена теми предметами, которые, на их взгляд, были наиболее интересны или наиболее знаково могли корреспондироваться с нашими памятниками.
Par la disposition dans l'espace. Au centre, en position dominante, il y a l'objet d'art qui a réuni l'Ermitage et la Maison Cartier. Et déployés autour comme des satellites ou des extensions sont les œuvres de haute joaillerie de la collection Cartier qui gravitent mue par une force invisible autour de cet objet. Cette force invisible, c'est justement un lien de continuité qui soit stylistique par la matière.
Это соединение меценатства, выставочной деятельности, реставрационной. Это совершенно правильное понимание, как надо обходиться с наследием. Его надо беречь, его надо с ним устраивать переклички, его надо показывать, и показывать его надо в разных диалогах. Диалог между старинным ювелирным искусством и новым, и диалог между Эрмитажной коллекцией и коллекцией Cartier.
Thinking about heritage should not be like a dusty things from the past, but first looking at these beautiful aesthetics and then in restoring how these were made is a constant source of inspiration and joy.
Это проект взаимодействия культур. Это самое важное, то, чем занимаются музеи. Музеи не выставляют красивые вещи, они строят их в диалоге.
Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for watching. A few words of how our discussion will be structured. In the second part of our session today, we will check of some questions from our website. To cover even more options, we will also address the students. And we have in the first block some questions and expectations already from them in our video. So let's have a watch.
Hello, my name is Ekaterina Kozlova. I'm a student of the Youth Center. I'd like to ask a question. Is there an opportunity to restore the educational program for PhD students at the State Hermitage? And is there an opportunity to make a program or a course of lectures in collaboration with the universities abroad? Thank you. Hello, my name is Anna Abramova. I study at Stiglitz Academy at the Department of Theory and History of Art. So I have a question regarding the items of cultural value. In modern world, they are preserved with the help of modern technologies. But don't you think that they can become an obstacle to perceive art as it is in the future? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Alexander Gachkov. I am a student at the Repin Academy of Fine Arts and the State Hermitage Youth Center. I have a question regarding the preservation of cultural heritage, not only by large organizations, museums, and corporations, but also by ordinary people who live not only in big cities like Moscow or St. Petersburg, but also in small towns. Can a simple citizen help preserve the cultural heritage of his or her country, or maybe the whole world from home, without going to museums, or are there any other ways to do it?
What do you believe is the most sensible way of transmitting the importance and value of time to future generations?
We already have some questions risen. So my first block of questions come to Cyril Vigneron. And the first question is that alongside the Hermitage, Cartier is doing today a lot to preserve the cultural heritage. What is your priority in this effort today, in this uneasy year?
That has come and has defined our style.
we should not see that as something kind of a nostalgic preservation of the past, but something that defines and makes us know and act into this world. So everything that can come, of course, with the know-how in many ways, but all the patrimony that has been done by all the objects that have been done, but also all the ideas that came and all the people who have won is something that we value and cherish. This being said, what is the priority in this time when we're with confinement, with lockdown, we can not travel so much, which means that it could not come and be with you physically, is that we have to keep dialogues, communication, we have to keep the relationship with people from a different part of the world in our organization, because from patrimony and for heritage, it only works if it's alive, not something of the past, but something that we live in our daily life. So that's why it's important to not only to preserve, but to continue to act on it, to continue to create from the inspiration it gives. If we stop creating, in some way things become dusty. So, and if we want to do that, we have to have everyone linked to each other.
Thank you very much. Cartier is known as a famous international brand, and the project you implement have a broad geographic coverage. What areas of culture you think is the most important ones to cover today?
I think all the areas are important to cover, and the relationship that the Maison have had with them can have been started from very long or more recent. So the relationship with Russia have been very old for more than 100 years. But same when Cartier settled in the United States and created the store in Fifth Avenue, it's also more than 100 years. But on the other side, Cartier came to China as a company much more recently, but not as a source of inspiration. And the source of inspiration came to the Asian forms of art and symbol have been very strong for early stage, even if we were not present on a commercial base. So 2 years ago, there was a very important exhibition in the Forbidden City, which was called Beyond Boundaries, but was basically the same theme of art dialogues and how inspiration can be mutual. So of course now Chinese customers are very important, but they were very important before in terms of inspiration. We'll have an important exhibition also about the importance of aesthetics, quote-unquote, and Islamic arts on geographic motifs and how this has shaped also the Art Deco style. So all these sorts of inspiration are equally important, and on that Russia takes an important space because of the richness of its culture. And then today, the fact to have a universal appeal all across the world is equally important. But so we should not link the source of inspiration to the commercial value of each country, but to have a constant dialogue everywhere where it's meaningful.
In French, there is a word patrimoine, heritage, that is hard to properly translate to any language. So does this concept of patrimoine has another meaning, a new meaning now? What does it mean for you and for the whole of the world?
So indeed, patrimoine has a complex meaning and difficult even to translate. So initially it comes from your father or your family, what you inherit, but what you develop also. It's something that you receive, you develop, and you transmit to then the other generation, not something that you just preserve from the past. But as also patria is also the country, what you receive from your own culture. Patrimony can have a very broad meaning of everything that one culture has created from the past. So if we think about French patrimony, it would include all the monuments and all the piece of art or culture of history that have been made. So when it comes to a company or brand or maison like us, then it means everything that has defined us, not only as a style, but also as a personality, because that's a living narration, we can say. So our role is supposed to be the custodian of this narration and to continue to fuel the story in modern days, because we are lucky enough to have very broad and rich patrimony with many sources of inspiration, but they have to be alive today. And the question is not what do we have to preserve, or not to think about attention, because preserving the heritage or innovating for current time. It's how to keep the tradition alive and to make it relevant for everyone today. So to be a very young and modern maison with a long history and heritage and aesthetic sense and codes that have defined us. So there is no paradox or no tension. The right notion is living heritage, like Japanese say, national living treasure. Patrimony and tradition being alive, and we constantly preserve, restore, develop, enrich, and prepare for the future, creating something today that will be the treasure of tomorrow, and respecting the treasure of the past to know how they can be beautiful for all generations today. Most of our creation are made in periods people just don't know. They cannot know when a design was made 10 years ago, 50 or 100, because they are relevant today and because they are truly timeless. So our patrimony is everything that's made us who we are, and our role is to continue to enrich it for today and for tomorrow.
I have a question that interests many in this audience. Is the classical brand changing as its customers are getting younger?
It should not. A real classic, is true every time. And that's a part where if you're truly timeless, you're contemporary all the time. If you try to adjust with times in some way, to make something which just in the short period or just in the fashion, then you may be obsolete very soon. And what so far, we are a desirable maison all across the world and also across young generation. And this young generation appreciate creation which have been made today or in the past as well. So we should not change ourselves. So there was, for instance, the question, should we do connected watches? It was a very practical question about that. And I said no, because connected watches are connected to technology that is very perishable. 20 years ago, there were no iPhone, and probably in 20 years from now, they would have been replaced by something else, more convenient. But 50 years ago, the love bracelet and the Jus Saint Cloud were invented, and they are still contemporary today, and they will be still in 50 years. So we are in a time span which is longer than some technology that changed too fast to be compatible with what we do. It doesn't mean we don't have to live with our time. It doesn't mean we have not to have a Zoom conference. It doesn't mean we should not use WhatsApp or WeChat and others, which are modern way to connecting people. But we should be true to who we are, and what we produce are objects of lasting value. So being a classic means being contemporary all the time. And on that, I encourage you to read Italo Calvino when he talks about classic, and it's very, very accurate, or some Umberto Eco. But also you can see that, Ivan Bunin heroines, they are so contemporary and so true today. So it's not a part of say we have to write something new now, but how to find what these classic authors tell you, which are still relevant today. Maybe do a different staging, maybe do a different show, in a different way to show it. If you want to do a story on Instagram, it will be different than if you're on stage in the Mariinsky, for instance, but the story would be the same, because these are universal stories that touch all human beings at any time.
I know that over the years, Cartier has been inspired with many historical styles around the globe. And I want to ask you my final question regarding the Cartier's long and unique connection with St. Petersburg. We wish you are here with us in this snowy day, but I'd love to ask you, what stage did this connection go through through time, and what place in the heritage this St. Petersburg story occupies in the Cartier today?
So the Russian heritage and the St. Petersburg heritage have had a long history on defining Cartier's style, and there have been many relationship with clients in there. But also the Russian, I would say, view on the world, aesthetically or symbolically, has been also very important. So it is important in our style and many products on the tiara and the garland, so in the aesthetic style in there, but also relation with emotion, which is unique, I think, to Russia. In the part can be both European to Asian culture at length. So the way I think St. Petersburg is reinventing itself today. Also, it's a part which is very, very inspirational. So in short, 3 parts: the old relationship of Cartier with Russia, the aesthetics was done, the products were made for Russian customers for a very long time, and how they feel about it, but also how Russian culture has influenced and inspired, and how also Russia is kind of reinventing itself, especially St. Petersburg these days. That is also important in our view and in our relationship with it.
Thank you very much, Cyril. This applause go to you. And I pass my word to Janina.
Mikhail Borisovich, State Hermitage has a network of the foundations across the world. I know there is a foundation in the US and also in Amsterdam. How do you federate and leverage across these foundations? What is the mission of these foundations?
Well, it's not only foundations. Hermitage is a global museum in the global world. It became a global museum. First, it became Universal Museum, Encyclopedic Museum, at the beginning of the century. In the second part of the century, been a global museum. There is a slogan, it is museum, it's Universal Museum, which has an encyclopedia written in Russian language. So it's a Russian museum, but it's a world museum. It belongs to the world, and it's a very important part of the general concept of heritage, to whom heritage does belong. So we are global. We are trying to be present all over the world, outside St. Petersburg. Sorry, we are very arrogant for us. It's St. Petersburg and the world. And we have certainly friends in Amsterdam, but we don't have friends in Moscow yet. But we do have organization of friends and Hermitage centers. We have Hermitage centers and Hermitage Sputniks in Amsterdam. That's what is connected with the friends. We have Hermitage Sputniks in Italy, in Kazan, in Vyborg, in Omsk, and so on. And friends. It's all interconnected. We want to reach different kinds of audience to tell them about Hermitage, not just about the objects which we have, about the style Hermitage is working, developing our style of presenting art, which is presenting world art in Russian language through tradition of Hermitage, which is, by the way, now we very much love the term museum management. So the 250 years of history of Hermitage is the best textbook in museum management. Not only it's a good text in the art history. So all this global network in different forms is our presence in the world.
Thank you. We go further. Another question. For many years, you have been running the Hermitage, the leading museum, not only in Russia, but in fact in the world, the biggest one. Has the attitude of the museum and that of the world to the issue of heritage evolved in any way during this time?
To repeat, it's technology. No, I can't hear you. It's a problem.
I will repeat. I'm sorry.
Which one?
Can I take it?
Can you say it in normal?
Dmitry, can we ask some normal questions?
Yeah, no, it's a normal question in English, but
yes.
The words.
During this long time, had been running the Hermitage, a huge and leading museum in the world. How has the attitude of the museum and that of the world to the issue of heritage evolved? Like when we start to speak about this heritage and the issue is that we should preserve it and to do something for the next generation.
There are two very important issues connected with the heritage which you have to preserve through museums, and it's issue what is heritage, to whom does heritage belong? Because we all know heritage belongs to all of us, la 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 la. You know, it's a very important idea. When a crowd stormed Capitol in Washington, one lady I have read said, "Oh, I have been here never before, but it all belongs to us. So that's why we invaded." We know this story from the storming of the Winter Palace. It belongs to us, heritage is ours. It sounds very good. But in general, heritage doesn't belong to us. It was given to us for keeping. It was given to us from our previous generation, and we have to keep it, enrich, and give it to the next generation. we have our rights to our heritage. They're very limited, because if we say it belongs to us, the final idea is, if I don't like it, I'll destroy it. This was Islamic radicals are doing, this is what Bolsheviks have been doing in Russia, this is what now people are doing in America and France, all over, destroying the monuments. The heritage belongs to the world and to history, and it's our obligation at certain limits to keep it. And that's what museum has tried to develop.
I want to ask you one question that now all museums are making databases, and of course Hermitage is doing the database for ages already. So will this notion of the heritage change, because now databases are available to everybody and anybody can look at any object from a museum? You know, it kind of becomes international. So will the very notion of heritage change because of it?
Well, I don't think so. I think we have to see how we adjust these modern technologies to the heritage and how we divide between, copies have been done always. And copy has its own role in culture and art. Now we have virtual museums and so on. It's another kind of museum, which is good and important, but never forget that digital is not the best. Digital is the second best, what we need. In music, now we have all the digital, the people who understand have the vinyl discs, and they know that it is better. So it's a division. You have this one kind of copies will be accessible to everybody. Another kind of objects will be accessible also to everybody, but you have to do something. Not only to buy a ticket, you have to learn something to understand. Art is luxury. When everything becomes accessible, you understand that some things become luxury. We have to make this luxury accessible for everybody. So this is how we do it.
My last question, probably also we will be talking today in another session about the digital heritage, because what becomes digital now also becoming, a heritage in a way. A photograph taken in the Hermitage in 2020 will become in 20 years something, a document. So do you think this kind of material will become another part? Like we have the photography collection that was sometimes just documents, now that's artifacts and so on. So do you see the future of this now? Because most of our audience are people who know everything about gaming, blockchain and so on. So do you see this, do you envisage this new part of the heritage?
Well, I think yes, we have to think how we keep it, because, we have selfies in the museum. Yes, now we have special places in most museums where you can take selfies, so it makes you a series of pictures. Everybody with the Klim's kiss, for instance, in Vienna, it's by itself is a series of interesting things. We are now developing some schemes of studying experience of people in the museum, so it brings things together. Now we, together with the European University in St. Petersburg, we are preparing plans for the new art school, which will study also modern ways of, technological ways of studying or understanding art and heritage. And there are a lot of projects with artificial intelligence, which are very much knowledgeable. One of the things with artificial intelligence will study the reaction of people in the museum, what they do. Certainly there is a terrible thing, though. They think that maybe they'll choose pictures for you like they're choosing to you in the internet. Not this, but studying the different ways of people behaving with art. Not just what do you make, where do you make your selfie, but how many minutes you stay there. And then they can begin to ask you, and it will be a special line, I think, special cultural product, and it will be heritage, yes. By the way, there already are wonderful studies in Instagram, about Instagram. People publish their pictures on Instagram about Hermitage, and just a choice of who is choosing what paintings and how you make the photos. You can make different ways of photos. You smile, or you drink, or you are naked, or whatever. So it's part of all this rubbish. Some art will come, but certainly it has, for the next generation, it is to decide what stays, what goes on.
Thank you very much, Mikhail Borisovich. saying the word selfie, I remember my last visit to the Louvre, and I was very shocked because initially everybody would look into Gioconda and film the Gioconda. Nobody is staying backwards to Gioconda and trying to make selfie with the Gioconda in the backside. So it's total change of attitude. And my next question goes to Pierre Nero, and who is very much involved with heritage and style in Cartier. So do you think these two notions will be transformed in the heritage and style? Will they be transforming over centuries? What changes is happening now with these two key notions for all institutions like Cartier or Hermitage Museum?
Well, thank you for your question. I think there is a very specific reason at Cartier why style and heritage are linked. Because as Cyril said it, it's in fact at Cartier a living heritage we are talking about. Style was born at the beginning of the 20th century, more or less. The Cartier style was born more or less when Cartier went to Russia. And it's the will and the desire of Louis Cartier to establish a specific way for Cartier to express a point of view on all diverse creations. So we are talking here of a creative language, and I would say a living language. Because talking about style as a language, it means that the way we create is linked to a sort of grammar, meaning some intangible elements that you will always recognize in all Cartier creations. But also you have an aesthetical vocabulary, and in those pictures you see now, you see some examples like the cabochon, like some combinations of colors. And the Russian influence is very present in this vocabulary even today. So the style was born in a context what was very specific, the beginning of the 20th century. So these fundamentals are part of a heritage. So if the creators of today want, and they have to understand what is the Cartier style, they have to go to the heritage to understand all the founding elements, to be able to create a very strong evolution to that, and to make the contemporary Cartier language relevant for the persons of today, for our clients of today, all around the world. So that's why the two notions are very, very linked at Cartier. The style is based in our heritage. Our heritage is part of our, again, founding elements. But, it's like, someone, I was talking about the creators, it's like someone learning a foreign language. At the beginning, you have to get familiar with the grammar, the dictionary, and everything. But then, when you have those notions in mind, you feel totally free, and you don't need to go back to the books. And that's the fact that happens today with our creators. Now they master, they monitor the Cartier style with a certain experience, and they project the Cartier style in the future, and their work will become also part of a heritage of tomorrow.
Thank you, Pierre. Cartier stories can be described as a work with numerous styles, formats, and distinguished names. How does the Cartier brand manage to maintain its consistency and style?
This is a very interesting question, because I think effectively Cartier is one of the maisons in the world with an incredible richness of expressions, many different expressions. And that's why the notion of style is very central, because it emphasizes the common point of view, because you can see also the Cartier style as a point of view on many different ways of expressing the creative mind. As you know, of course, we are very active in many different kinds of objects, jewelry and very, very prestigious also pieces of jewelry, but also day-to-day pieces of jewelry, watches, clocks, objects, many different kinds of items are produced by Cartier. But the link is a very specific point of view around, I think, an array of values. We have values in terms of aesthetics, in terms of craftsmanship, in terms of excellence, and that goes beyond the recognizable style. It's a system of values that are really at the center of all the different creations. And I would say also that the idea to propose many different objects is also part of that system of values, because it's an opportunity for Cartier to express its creativity, but it's also a kind of service that is offered to our clients to have or to benefit from the Cartier notion of beauty, of elegance in many different kinds of objects.
At the expense of Cartier, 5 objects from the Hermitage collections were restored. So how did the choice fall on these objects, and how the work was going over these years?
I think it's a common choice between the museum and Cartier, but it's true that every single object that has been chosen resonates with the Cartier history in terms of craftsmanship. You have objects that covers a period of a millennium, 10 centuries. You have a rock crystal sculpture from Islamic art, but also very interestingly has been remounted lately in another way. You have a piece from the Mughal Empire, and also it's very interesting to see that that piece was offered by the Persian Empire to the Russian Empire, showing also the interest in many different art from different countries already at that period, already in the 17th century. And it was very precious in the eyes of the people of that period. And you have also an object of the 19th century, so I will not cite them all. And you see that at the same time, the origin of the object, the craftsmanship of the object, and the style of the object resonate with Cartier. And that's why the selection of pieces from the Cartier collection that are presented today at the Hermitage, together with each of those 5 pieces, is very interesting, because it shows in a different way how Cartier, at its level, worked also with those different craftsmanships, with those different inspirations, and also maintained and developed and enriched those craftsmanships all through the 20th century and now during the 21st century.
Pierre, and last question about digitalization. The digitalization of heritage, will it somehow change the attitude towards heritage and its various status? How and in what particular way should a brand with such a story change in the face of new digital trends?
First, we should consider digital as an incredible opportunity. It's a way of sharing what we do, our knowledge, but never existed before. So it gives access to, again, those beautiful objects to a public who would never had access to that before. It's true for the public. It's true also internally, I say, for the Maison, because it's an incredible way of sharing also everything that is in the heritage department for the creators, but not only for the creators, for everybody. And so this is very positive. I also totally agree with Mr. Petrovsky, because digital will not replace the creations themselves. I think to be in touch or to be in contact or to see personally the object is really at the source of the emotion, and to really appreciate how an object is made of, and the attention of the craftsman at the period when they created it, the spirit behind it, how it testifies from the culture in which it was born. It's something that you really realize when you're in front of the object. But again, digital is a tool, and a wonderful tool. I also agree that there's an enormous question about the way, in terms of archives, we will keep the traces of everything digital today. This is a challenge, and we don't have yet the answers for, let's say, our successors in 20 or 30 years from now, how we will deal with everything that is produced digitally today. And this is a real question. The objects hopefully will remain, but the digital images and the digital informations about those objects, nobody has the answer yet. Because when we think something is permanent, we discover a bit later that it's not permanent at all, and there's a risk of losing the information within those tools. So yes, this is a challenge for the future, and that's why also the other way of keeping the information are still valid, and we should also have that in mind in what we do, in what to do today.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Thank you for your answers.
Can I jump in a little bit to add on both what Pierre said and what Mr. Piotrowski? So to explain about style, I want to make an analogy with Russian music. And when you talk about Russian classical music, there is a Russian style that goes between all the Russian composers, with the Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, Scriabin, but also Prokofiev, Borodin. You can find a Russian style, but you can also find a heritage coming from other part of European. In Shostakovich, you can hear Bach, and this is a dialogue, and all come together. But even a smaller scale, the Bolshoi has a style which is different from the Kirov, and the Bolshoi is different from the Royal Ballet in London, but they all play on the same thing in playground. And that's some way, there is a Cartier style, rather broad, in the same way there's a Russian musical style. But also Cartier has a style which is different from other maisons in the way the Bolshoi can be different from the Royal Ballet of the Opéra de Paris. And I think this part are both linked with what heritage can be and how it can be alive, and how the differences can make each very, very specific, and how they can talk to each other. And as Mr. Piotrowski also said, there's something that digital can bring, that you can have all the music on your iPhone and you can download it very easily. But what would replace a magnificent show in the Bolshoi or in the Mariinsky or in the Opéra de Paris, when not only have something live, but you can also share all the emotion with everyone. And especially in Russia, emotion means a lot. So this part will never be replaced, either because something is physical or something as you share live with others. And it's a part where we can bring many new things, but if we are saying comfortable and conscious about what comes from the past, what we have to give now in modern ways, and how the new tools help us, then it can be very, very rich together in this dialogue. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you very much, Cyril, and it's very good points for our next session that we'll be dealing with music and performing arts. And I want to remind you that we are broadcasting this day from St. Petersburg, Russia, and now we move with our dialogue from Paris to Versailles. And my next question goes to Laurent Salomé, the director of Château de Versailles. And the first question is about the special place of Versailles among world museums. And we're talking today about changes that happens with heritage or are happening with the heritage. So what attitude to the term of heritage did undergo in Château de Versailles over the last couple of months?
Well, Versailles, of course, is a place where the word heritage has a very special meaning. And it's really the meaning of the place itself is heritage, because as you all know, it was the place of the royal power. And the question after the revolution was to destroy Versailles, maybe. Many people had this plan for the palace, or to keep it, to preserve it for future generations, which very quickly developed. And fortunately, the idea of creating a museum in Versailles happened very soon, in the years 1790. And then there were different projects of museum, although Napoleon stopped the museum because he tried to live in Versailles. So we have a complicated story between the normal life of a palace, a place for power, and a place of heritage for the public. And of course, the second solution finally won, and Louis-Philippe turned Versailles into a museum dedicated to all the glories of France. And then the notion of heritage has changed constantly since that time until today, and we have a different vision, of course, of what heritage means. It's not just a building, even if it's a fantastic building with great collections of paintings, decorative arts. It's also a place to tell the history. And maybe today we have more attention for little symbols, little objects, ways to tell the story of life in Versailles. How did the people at the court live here? And people like those stories, even sentimental love stories, which were very important in Versailles. So heritage is a very vast notion. And here in Versailles, we have an opportunity to address all different types of heritage, including natural heritage, objects, but also history, memory, and music, creation, because it's always been a place for creation, theater, music, opera. So anything connected with heritage exists and lives in Versailles.
Second question is about again, connection between Russia and France. As we all know, the founder of St. Petersburg, Peter the Great, came to the idea of his residence, Peterhof, after he visited Versailles. So this transfer of the Versailles legacy took place at the Tsar's will. He wanted to do it. So many artists today continue to be inspired in Versailles, and we know that Versailles is working a lot with contemporary artists. So how do you feel about the issue of cultural borrowing and transfers of meanings and heritage today?
It's true that the visit of Peter the Great was one of the greatest examples of the influence of Versailles across the world. There have been many others, and influences have always occurred in both directions, because of course, as you see in the Hall of Mirrors, Versailles is also inspired by Italy and the great palaces of the Italian Renaissance and Baroque time. And then artists from all over Europe came to Versailles, to the court. And of course, at the peak of the splendor of Versailles, there was a huge influence on Europe, and even across the world. There were those famous embassies from Asia coming to Versailles, and Louis XIV, the Sun King, considered himself as the greatest king of the world, so he had a real interest for all parts of the world. So there's something very international in the essence of Versailles. And of course, this continues today. We still have, and it's more and more international. Now our audience is completely international. We have 85% of foreign visitors. The French were only 15% before the pandemic. So it's really a place that speaks to the world. And now we have the same feeling with contemporary artists. It's a place that inspires artists from all cultures, even very different cultures from the French one. We also have a very important activity with foreign institutions, and we organize exhibitions in China. We have cooperations with Russia. We have cooperations with, of course, America, Australia. And there's a fascination for Versailles, which is different in each place. In Singapore, we had a digital project 2 years ago, which had an enormous success. And we understand through those experiences that everybody has a different vision of Versailles. Some people think more of the king, some more of the queen. Some know that Napoleon was also an important character here. Some see the splendor and the power. Some see the poetic of nature and objects. So the fact that we are very international is, of course, a great richness.
So my last question is about nature. We all know that in Versailles, historical and architectural heritage coexist with natural heritage. How should modern work on the conservation of natural heritage be structured?
It's true that Versailles is also a wonderful natural heritage. The gardens are huge and magnificent, and we have to play with water a lot. That was one of the great dreams of Louis XIV, to master water, which was such a difficult element to control, and how to bring water to Versailles. He tried the most crazy works to bring water from rivers very far from Versailles, and never succeeded. He killed thousands of people doing this. And we built this machine, La Machine de Marly, which was on the River Seine, to bring the water up to reservoirs around Versailles. So all this crazy project about water, we're still preserving it, and we're working the fountains of Versailles exactly with the same natural way, with gravity, as it was in the 17th century. And it's the same for nature itself. We're trying to understand the relation with nature. We have very famous gardeners who've been working for the king, and we know, we have books, we have their treaties, and we try to, of course, recreate the same kinds of gardens, the same plants. We're working on the botanical science of that time, and we're always trying to respect the way things were understood in the 17th or 18th century in Versailles. So I think even in the gardens you have a very strong feeling of time, and we are recreating some of the bosquets, the groves that have disappeared. For instance, now we have a project with the Bosquet de la Reine, which is the only late 18th century grove in the palace. We are replanting the very special trees that Marie Antoinette liked, and it was a completely new type of garden, probably even the source of the new romantic garden of the 19th century. So this is all based on research, and it's important to know that working on a garden is as much research as working on the objects, the furniture and the decorative arts in the palace. It's exactly the same kind of work, and another part of the museum.
Thank you very much indeed, Laurent, for these answers.
Thank you.
We have a question for all of you, all speakers, and I'll address it first to you, Mikhail Borisovich. The question is very simple, but very important. We're talking about heritage today in the Hermitage. What does the world needs today in order to preserve cultural heritage for future generations?
What is really needed, everybody has to look, to study, to see and inform what happens to every small piece of heritage, the public. Public must always make noise. If something happened with this or another object of heritage, because we have wars all over the world, we have wars of memory all over the world. We need everyday information from every private person by telephone to somewhere. Today something happened to this piece of heritage, something. So I think it's very important, so everybody will be together in saving the heritage.
Cyril, what is your opinion and answer to this question?
Well, I agree with what Mr. Piotrowski has said, that everyone has to be conscious about the piece of heritage that are close to us and the one that need to be understood and preserved. And then there is a need of respect. As have been said, there have been some conflicts and so forth, and then during these conflicts, many important universal human heritage can be destroyed and can never be back. So there should be a global view of that heritage being the common human patrimony, and everyone is responsible to support it and to do it. And at the same time, having also the part that environment as a whole is a part that we have to support and preserve and develop in the same way we think about our art and history. But the two things. Now, the natural heritage is as important as the cultural one. And when we have to make some choices, we should be careful. For there have been terrible things happening in Notre-Dame de Paris, where the wooden part burned. And so there was some question, should it be rebuilt in the same way it was 1,000 years ago? But if you do that, you have to cut about 1,000 of very old oaks. Does it make sense today to cut these oaks now, when you can do it another way, to do another carpentry that can make the rooftop appear the same way it was, in something lighter for the structure and preserving also the nature around? So we have to combine question in new ways, and we have to be conscious and talk about it openly.
Thank you. Pierre?
Well, I have two comments on the importance of heritage. First, I would stick to the common say that is, if we want to know where we are going to, we have to know where we are coming from. And I think another way also of saying that heritage is our identity. So if we want to know who we are, I think we should take care about our heritage. And I have a second comment on another dimension, which is very, I think, I don't know if it's selfish, but I think heritage is a huge enjoyment. It's a joy. It's a joy to look at all the creations of the past and to understand the history, the human dimension in the building of a heritage. It's an incredible way of understanding the human nature and let's say human genius, I would say. And so I would say just enjoy,
Thank you very much, Pierre. Thank you so much. To sum up, I would say that we are now, today, enjoying this conversation in this encyclopedic museum. And I would, on behalf of all of us, I would like to thank again Dr. Michał Piotrowski for having us here. Thank you very much indeed. And I also wish to congratulate the Hermitage and Cartier for the fantastic exhibition just opened. So everybody is very much welcome. And in this first session, we have discussed the legacy of material culture of the past and the way how to develop it in the future. What happens in the music, in the performing art? This is the next session that will start in 5 minutes and will be presented by Anita Gigovskaya, the president of Condé Nast Russia. See you all in 5 minutes. Thank you.